Toyota refuses to put all its zero-emission eggs in one basket, and thus the Hydrogen HiAce is born. This prototype van is part of a world-first pilot project taking place in Melbourne, Australia, and it's expected to spawn several other hydrogen combustion engine vehicles from the brand, such as a HiLux and even a LandCruiser. Join us for a drive of the Hydrogen V6 van, and we also want to know, do you think hydrogen is a good alternative to EVs? Also championed as a replacement for diesel, hydrogen is one of the many powertrain options Toyota is experimenting with ahead of stricter emissions regulations coming into force over the coming decades. So what is it and how does it work? So this is basically a passenger HiAce, 12 seats in the back, and it's running a 3.5 litre twin turbo V6 petrol engine with a significant difference. The fuel injectors have been changed, but that is pretty much it. Obviously there's lots of changes to software and there's crazy amount of plumbing to get hydrogen to go in, but it operates just like a regular internal combustion engine. Fuel and air goes in, they explode, they push the piston, and then you get your locomotion. The main difference here is that there are 3 parts air to 1 part fuel. In most petrol engines, it's 1 part air to 1 part fuel. So it's running very lean. The idea there is to make it more efficient. Toyota argues that few EVs are carbon neutral, when almost 70% of electricity generation in Australia comes from fossil fuels. But this high-tech van isn't squeaky clean either, although it comes close, being 99.8% carbon neutral. So it can't officially be called a zero-emission vehicle because it is still burning a tiny amount of oil for lubrication, cooling through the engine. But essentially the only tailpipe or the main tailpipe emissions include water. So when the hydrogen is burnt, it mixes with the oxygen and then you get H2O. However, because there is roughly 80% nitrogen in the air, there is nitrogen oxides coming out. So there's a tiny bit of AdBlue in this vehicle as well, but it is minuscule compared to a regular diesel engine. So this world first pilot project in Australia is looking at how this internal combustion engine works with the hydrogen fuel. And given that it's a regular HiAce but highly modified, we've got some really cool instruments here. And all the data, even driving right now, is being sent back to Japan, and they're monitoring this and they're studying it to see what optimizations can be made. And in future, who knows, in 10 years, this vehicle could be on sale in Australia, providing an alternative to, say, a battery electric delivery van. The Hydrogen HiAce has been in development for 3 years and features a 10-speed automatic transmission driving the rear wheels. So I'm quite familiar with this 3.5 litre twin-turbo V6, having driven vehicles like the Lexus LX, and it is a monster petrol V6. However, in this vehicle, because it runs so lean, it produces far less power and torque, and it doesn't feel particularly powerful, but it is surprisingly quiet and very smooth. Toyota engineers told us that it has plans to deploy hybrid electric tech to this hydrogen V6 engine to improve power while reducing fuel consumption. Toyota has been a little slow to the party with EVs, but it does plan on beefing that up soon. But it's also said when it comes to commercial vehicles and bigger vehicles and vehicles that tow, vehicles with longer ranges, that's where this technology will come in. And it's kind of interesting. They've been talking about potentially this technology going into LandCruiser and HiLux and maybe more models, so that they can still fuel up in around 5 minutes, much quicker than an EV, and they'll have more range and a lot more towing capacity. At the moment, this prototype Hydrogen HiAce van has a range of about 200 kilometers. That's not a lot, but Japanese engineers working on this project have said they plan to trial bigger tanks and improve the range. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops over the next few years. One of the really interesting things about this technology is the fact that it won't be horrendously expensive to make the modifications to the current internal combustion engine setups. Sure, you've got to put a pressurized hydrogen tank in the back and all the plumbing that goes with it, but Toyota has hinted that these vehicles might not be as expensive as people are expecting. They could be cheaper even than equivalent EVs. We'll have to wait and see, but it's pretty exciting to know that there will be alternative low emission vehicles out there for customers. The only problem at the moment is the lack of infrastructure, with only a handful of hydrogen refueling stations located across Australia. But Toyota hopes that by showing off this prototype as a proof of concept, more investors will come to the table. This technology has a lot of promise from so many different angles, and I do feel pretty privileged to drive one of the first combustion engine hydrogen vehicles in Australia. It is very interesting, and to be honest, it just drives like any other car. So I think a lot of customers warm to this idea, perhaps more than maybe an EV. Time will tell. But as it stands, stay tuned for more details on this fascinating concept on carsales.com.au. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know what you think in the comments below. Could hydrogen be an alternative to diesel-powered vehicles?